Hello and welcome back to Getting Into TV. I'm Tom, your host, everything there is to know about scripted and unscripted TV. This week, it's a little bit different to usual because rather than having one guest, I've not only got two, I've actually got three guests. I really hope you enjoy wherever you're watching or listening.
For the industry to remain sustainable, we need a workforce coming through. We need to nurture that, support people coming in, giving them the best guidance possible. We want people to come to Wales, but the fact that obviously we've got the landscapes and that's always drawing people in, but the crew and the talent here as well.
I got to my 40s and I was like, well, I'm never going to break into this industry. I'm never going to have my dream job because I've got this far and haven't. Go into the panel and people are like, well, we've got people that worked in Costa and they've got customer service skills and they've got transferable skills that they can bring to these jobs. I've put all these blocks in my own way. It's been crazy to me that I probably could have done this years ago. I just didn't think I could.
I've been applying for the better part of 3 years by some weird, stars aligned. As soon as I finished uni, I got an opportunity to be on one. I had the opportunity to work on a couple of It's My Shout short films. Yeah. And those give you technically sort of a TV credit.
Hi Reece, welcome to the podcast. For anyone listening, Reece is the Welsh Language Education and Training Manager at Screen Alliance Wales.
Yeah, great to be here. So I've listened to so many times and it's great to hear what the podcast does. One of the biggest challenges I have is there isn't one simple answer. Every day's a learning day in this industry.
First, I want to know about your background, how you got to Screen Alliance Wales and why you like being there, really.
My pathway is not the stereotypical pathway, which in itself is, in some respects, the stereotypical pathway because people get to where they go in this industry not through the route that you're kind of maybe sold in a careers advice, that there is a kind of linear path. I wanted to work in the TV and film industry, but growing up in rural West Wales, it seemed like a distant world. Oh, yeah. And I was doing a lot of stuff with hospital radio, community radio on in West Wales. That got me some contacts and I was able to spend some time at the BBC and deciding what to do at university. So we said, try and broaden your horizons, consider something other than a media degree. So I went into psychology and then did that degree, then panicked because I suddenly thought, how am I going to get into the industry? I signed up for a BDC. So I did teaching for a few years and then I've kind of like worked my way back through. I became an education officer for a charity, started making films there, and that opened the door to get back into the industry. I can see myself in the fact that it wasn't a direct path to get to Screen Alliance Wales. Looking back, what may have been wrong turns, I've picked up information, I've picked up skills through those wrong turns, which are kind of you kind of amass and snowball. When I started here as a part of working along, when His Dark Materials was working here, being a fan of the books, introduced to the books by a pupil when I was teaching. We were collaborating with the Hay Festival. So I was doing a kind of a online resource where I got to interview Jack Thorne about adapting things. And we prepared beforehand, giving him 4 questions. And then as you start talking, sometimes you saying something, and I went and spoke to Philip Pullman. The 4 questions became about 15 because it was kind of like every time again, I was like, hang on, you clarify that? So there's a connection between that person and that person. That's not in the books. Philip's got, pages and pages of other bits talked about. So yeah, you get that insight into every stage of the process from the original text and then going through to the adaptation process and how that comes through. You do have to persevere because nobody'd heard of Ian McKellen until he was in his 60s. He gets a role in which you can look as being a negative thing, but in terms of aspirations and dreams, you've got to keep plugging away.
No, definitely. You never know when that break will come. Before we talk about local talent, the work you do, can you share some projects that Screen Alliance Wales has been involved in? What do you do?
Work with the TV and film industry, and it's really about sustainability of the industry. Part of that, we work with people age 7 and up because we wanted to try and get people aware and thinking about potential careers before they even start making choices in school. We work closely with Bad Wolf Productions, so Doctor Who, His Dark Materials industry, but we have been involved in other projects up in North Wales with The Watchmen a few years back, and last year we were helping out with House of the Dragon.
You kind of did touch upon it there, but how does Screen Alliance Wales support then local talent? And I suppose a part of your thing is to promote the Welsh film and TV industry, like you say. How do you go about doing that? And why is it important?
There is that kind of that aspect that we've got we're promoting jobs and we support trainees on productions. So particularly with the Bad Wolf Productions, when we have trainees, it's not just about giving people a job. It's about the fact that kind of supporting people. We provide them with part of our sort of remit as well. We provide them with training, and it's so that if they get in sort of a trainee role, we then provide them, make sure they've got first aid certificates, that they've got sort of health and safety certificates, fire marshal training. For people starting in the industry post-COVID, we will do mental health training because it's kind of like people entering the industry. It was a bigger sort of shock to the system, so to speak, than what has been for generations past. We're trying to ensure that somebody finishing as a trainee is coming out not just with having had a paid job, but that they are armed and better placed going forward. Before that, we offer sort of, work shadowing placements. And a part of that is that we're discussing about the fact that the people that we've had as trainees or coming on as work shadowers, how many of them, that actually around about 10% sort of decides to walk away from the industry. And in some respects, we would say that is a positive thing, because we don't want to sugarcoat the industry. Okay, it is this fantastic days you get onto it, and it is like like a kid at Christmas whenever I get to go walk around around the set. I've never discouraged anybody, but I'm always kind of like making it clear to people in terms of what it involves, because we don't want to set people up to fail, and livelihoods are still lives. They're not separate. It is about sort of trying to support that as much as possible.
One way that it is improving, and obviously you mentioned there that there's a lot to do, but I suppose one way that the industry does improve is by what you do and what other people do in terms of nurturing that new talent from the get-go. For instance, like you obviously do a lot with schools and in education, and it's about, like you say, nurturing that talent from the grassroots. And it's like not only like showing them the industry, but by doing that and opening their eyes, when they eventually get in the industry, it will be a better industry, if that makes sense. Like they'll be going, it won't be going into an industry that is they won't be so shocked.
Everything you do can be linked to jobs within the industry. If you think about alien creature design, you have to understand how that alien evolves to live on that planet and understand the principles of evolution. So we've got a desert or a swamp planet. So how would that alien be evolved to live on that swamp planet? And it can be evolved and build a story of that character. And then you think about food changes, and you then start thinking about, well, it needs to have a shell on to defend itself from that, or it needs sort of like big claws to be able to dig if it lives in a burrow. And then it's all these things that kind of, you've taken evolutionary principles or things like that and adapting them to creature design and but just linking it to science. But be bringing aliens, you're talking about Star Wars and Guardians of the Galaxy. You have to know what it's living with to be able to design a creature. So I think that's hitting sort of like the science example. We're going in talking about the maths in terms of marketing or within geometry, within VFX, any subject area, there's opportunities. So I think that linking it in, and with a career, thinking about careers at the end of it.
We've spoken a bit about local talent and the support you give, but what advice would you say to someone that you could give to someone that wants to start a career in Welsh film and TV industry? What should aspiring, say, like trainees know when applying for jobs?
The key thing is to understand the job you're applying for, to know what skills specifically are required, kind of zero in on that and focus your application around that, and not what you have maybe longer term aspirations to do. The best example is the script supervisor role, because we get people coming in, and obviously script supervisor, you get your foot in the door into the script department, then in the right place. If you have aspirations to be a writer, then there are far worse places you could be. However, for a script supervisor, you're doing continuity. So your continuity, attention to detail. And, to be honest, we've had instances, this has improved because we've tried to improve the thing, is, almost 80% of people, their CVs and applications are entirely focused on writing. That's not the skill set they need. I was talking to a producers yesterday, and he was saying everybody thinks their department is the most important one. And he's getting people applying for jobs as a production runner, and they say, "Yeah, I want to get a job in production and then go on to, I want to be on direct." And he's going, "No, I want you to come into production to stay in production."
Yeah.
It's a bit casual flattery. It's a bit kind of like bigging up their department, making them feel valued and important. So I always say to people, my tip, whenever if you get an interview and somebody asks, "Have you got any questions?" And I always say that the question to ask is, "Oh, I'm really intrigued to ask them about their career. Ask them," because it's about that casual flattery.
I'm going to steal that because I've spoken to a lot of people in the last few weeks about jobs and stuff. And I can never think of them on the spot.
And it even comes on to the application. I'll not mention which department it was, but we had 50 people apply for a job in a department. I passed the CVs on to said head of department, and he came back within 5 minutes with 3 people. Whenever I'm having a discussion, I always go back, because when people are unsuccessful, we do offer feedback. I said, "How did you get from 50 down to 3 in 5 minutes?" And he went, "Only 3 people mentioned my department in their opening statement. And if they don't mention my department, I don't think they want to work in my department."
We'll be coming back to Reece a little bit later on, so stay tuned for that. But next up, I'm chatting to Adrienne, who worked in the finance department on Doctor Who. We discuss a little bit about that department, but the main focus of this chat is talking about the fact that she's in her 40s and she broke into telly a little bit later than most, basically showing that it is possible. It's not just a young person's game.
This is your first job in the industry, so I'm really excited to kind of just talk to you. Because a lot of the time I speak to people that have been doing it for a few years or have been doing it for, say, 10 years. But I'm very excited to talk to someone at the start of their career and just kind of like see how you made that change and what brought you to this, and also to a job like within the finance department, because we haven't spoken about that. So the first place that I'd love to start is your journey of how you landed your first job in the TV industry, and what was it about the finance department that you were drawn towards?
I've been working in finance for the past 10 years, but a contract came to an end last year. And I happened to be on Twitter and saw that the BBC were doing Production Unlocked with Screen Skills last year. I've always been interested in the creative industries. Went to that, so inspired. I saw a post from Rebecca on Screen Skills on LinkedIn. She shared a post by this lady called Jamie Jones, who runs Wales Networking Group WhatsApp group. During the course of being on that group, she happened to share an accounts trainee role in Bad Wolf. I was like, I'll give it a go. I didn't get it, but a couple of days later, they actually contacted me to say that looking at the experience on my CV, they thought I was better suited for a step up.
Mhm.
So they actually offered me petty cash assistant on Industry 3, and that was my first role. So it was all these little domino effect just off me deciding to go to this panel last year.
What was it about the Production Unlocked that inspired you, that you were like, I want to go into this crazy world of telly?
I've always really been interested in doing something creative. I studied theatre in university. I did radio. I was a DJ for a long time. I've lots of fingers and lots of pies. But sort of off the back of that, I think it was more like the sense of community, not
Yeah.
competition. And I'd never really felt that. I got to my 40s and I was like, well, I'm never going to break into this industry. I'm never going to have my dream job. Go into the panel and people are like, well, we've got people that worked in Costa and they've got customer service skills and they've got transferable skills that they can bring to these jobs, and people are doing this and people are doing that. And I was like, I've put all these blocks in my own way. And it's been crazy to me that I probably could have done this years ago. I just didn't think I could.
Like you say, you've had all that other experience elsewhere and learning all this stuff that I wouldn't say you've necessarily put blocks in your way. It's just you didn't realize the thing. And it's that thing of just highlighting that even if you are doing a customer service job or a finance job or something, I know maybe you're working in a hospital somewhere, there's still transferable jobs within the industry that you can transfer over and go into things like Production Unlocked, which I know they do quite regularly.
Because I was in between jobs and it was, oh, I can sign up and take another contract and do what I've always been doing, or I can take a punt. And even when I got turned down for the accounts trainee role, I didn't take that badly. I was like, well, I've just done my first interview for
Yeah.
TV production. I now know how this process works. Even just stuff like your CV, but a TV production CV is very different to a CV that I would have been using for the last 10 years. Before I knew that I'd got the job, the petty cash assistant job, I signed up for a CV workshop with screen skills and did it over Zoom. There's so many opportunities and free opportunities
Yeah.
that you just don't realize are there.
And transitioning from what you were doing before to a television production, I suppose it can be quite a big shift. What were, I suppose, the biggest adjustments for you that you had to like make when you started working at Bad Wolf?
I've been used to working, not even just off the back of the pandemic, but just through the work that I do, working from home or working hybrid, not necessarily being in an office. And I actually found when I first started the job, I was quite peopled out by the end of the week.
Yeah.
Because obviously that's the nature of the job. You need to interact with people all day.
It goes
you know?
back to that thing of it's, if you said what you said, of it's like a community, it is like a family.
Yeah.
And I've said many times on the podcast that working in TV, it's long hours, it's crazy. You're going, like in my instance, I'm traveling all across the country and going to some crazy places, and it's long hours, and you're sometimes in really horrible weather.
Yeah.
But you're meeting people, and it's really nice. You build that community, and it's in the dark times, it's really helpful to have them people around.
In my first role, I sort of got on quite well with the girls in set deck and like got to sort of learn a bit about what they did.
Yeah.
And then I got a chance to actually go on set as part of my role. And that was my first job because they had a shot they needed to do with basically a stack of money. And I basically had to go there and eyeball it and make sure it didn't walk off the set. But it was such a nice opportunity to be like, this is part of my role. I'm still working with money and managing the money, but that was my first ever time on a TV set. And yeah, it was just pretty cool, do you know? And like building those relationships with other people in other departments has been quite interesting.
I did an episode with a production manager called Hannah Gosney, and she said something really good, which I think really is something probably that you feel the same in finance, is that one thing, like her job, she could go and do it in an office somewhere.
Yeah.
And it could just be for a company. But what's great about the TV industry is she's doing all the stuff she can do in an office, and she's getting to help create an end product. Like you're working in the finance department, but you're also helping to make Doctor Who.
Well, that's it, because I'm giving them the money to make their purchases, and then I get to see the receipts that come in for those purchases. And some of the stuff is so interesting. And I'm like, oh, well, I wonder what they're using this for. And, oh, this person's going to be wearing this in this episode. So it's like, yes, I'm in the accounts office all day, but you're still getting to sort of touch base with what's going on.
Just talking about your job then for a bit as a cashier.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do? Tell me a bit about your role, and also what's the team like within the finance department?
Industry was my first one, and that was paper-based. So everything was on paper. What happens is I would give people money, their petty cash. They go and make their purchases for whatever they need to buy for the production. They give me the receipts back. I account for all that in our systems. There's also purchase cards, which are sort of the equivalent of like a production credit card. So each department gets a certain amount on that card that they get to spend. And then they obviously have to give me the receipts to account for all that. It was more that they would do it themselves and then give it to me, and then I would sort that out. On Doctor Who, Bad Wolf, that they want to move digitally, you know, as we don't want to use paper if we can prevent it. Coming onto this production, people on this production have been used to working a certain way. And then I've come in and been, actually, this season, this is how we're going to do it. So it's been challenging, but it's worked. All the purchases they've made over the last week, I'll run a report on a Monday, make an envelope for them, that gets sent out to them, and then they just basically have to attach the receipts and send it back. So it's no digging through their transactions or putting it all together. I'm basically doing it for them. It's all about just basically giving them the money to make the purchases they need to make the production successful.
Yeah.
And like basically get that money on screen. You want to see that budget on the screen. So
definitely.
I give them the money to go off and do whatever it is they need to do.
And what does your team look like then? Is it just you, or is there more?
So on industry, we had myself, we've got an accounts payable person, we had an accounts trainee, payroll, first accountant, financial controller. On this one, we've had 2 accounts trainees, myself, accounts payable, I've got a production accountant, financial controller, and then 2 girls on payroll as well. But it's a bigger team because it's a bigger budget and there is a lot to do. So you need those extra people. And the trainees obviously help a lot. And I think that's really good as well because, we're helping 2 more people get into the industry. I think that's really important.
Shows such as Doctor Who and other big shows support trainees and support getting new talent because we need it. We constantly need new people. So it's really, and what I think was really good as well to highlight, and I hope you don't mind me saying, I think it's really good to highlight that you don't need to be a 20-year-old to get into the industry. And I think that's really important to highlight is the fact that you can be any age. I've worked with runners on various shows who, again, in their mid-40s or they're older, and they've always said that they felt a bit, I suppose, I can't think of the word, but they didn't feel like the industry was right for them because they were older. But that's not true. That's not the case because, I mean, for instance, again, your proof is there are opportunities out there.
The last year has been a real light bulb moment for me because I don't actually know what would have happened if I hadn't gone that production unlocked. And obviously all those series of events happened because it's exactly like I said, I'm in my 40s and I've felt for years that it's like, well, this is just never going to happen because it's so boring. But you get to this age, you've got adult responsibilities. And also I think I was like, well, if I go for a trainee role, it's financial compensation you're thinking of as well. You're like, well, am I actually going to be paid enough that I can do this role? And I think a lot of that was putting me off actually investigating it further because I was like, well, surely an entry level role isn't going to pay me enough to actually do a job that I enjoy and live. But it does. And I think it's like, I would really urge people to maybe do a wee bit more research because it's like I said at the beginning, I could have done this years ago. I just never knew I could.
And I think there is a certain onus, I think, on the industry to kind of make it known that it is more accessible. It's not just a young person's game. There is that stigma that should change. It's good that, like, living proof. And go and do it. You can go.
Yes.
As someone that's like relatively new to the TV industry, what would you say has been the most surprising or unexpected like aspect of working on something like Industry or Doctor Who?
It's similar sort of idea to sort of stuff I might have been doing previously. It's just a different industry. I like that I'm more accountable. I feel like, my day to day, while I report to the financial controller or the production accountant, I've particularly found in Doctor Who, like I'm running my own day. I have work to do and I do that work and it gets done today or it gets done tomorrow, or I decide, I can do that Friday. But no one's micromanaging me.
Yeah. What advice would you give to someone and to others that are looking to break into the TV industry?
Don't be afraid to go for stuff. I think if you see a role and you can see yourself in that role in some way, you may not get it. But I think the experience of going through the interview, preparing yourself for that, getting the feedback, like I think that's really going to help you get the next role if you don't get that one. I think just don't be afraid. Because I think that's been my problem. You really need to get out of that frame of mind and be like, I was working in Costa. I've got customer service skills. Well, you could go and be a runner. Obviously, like this is my first experience in TV. I can't tell people how hard runners work. They're some of the hardest working on the team. I don't feel like you should feel like anything's beneath you. Like until you get into the industry, I don't think you really know what's involved in each particular role.
Working in telly, it's not just like, okay, you've got your directors and you've got your producers and you've got people, you've got the hierarchy, but it is a massive team. You are all equal in the fact that without the runner, the first AD can't do their job, and without the runner, the actor can't do their job, and without, say, the camera person, sound can't do their. Like it's all interlinked. Like you are all, without the one person, it just wouldn't work. And I think what you said is, don't be afraid. Just like go, and if you want to do it, and it is harder for some people, but just try.
Try, yeah.
Try.
And
and annoy all the right people, email them, phone them.
I think from what I've gathered from moving into the industry, I don't think many people are going into TV thinking I want to move into accounts. So like the opportunities are there because people are obviously wanting to go into other areas.
What kind of person is perfect for accounts within TV?
Oh, that's a very good question. I do think it helps being personable. I've come on to Doctor Who and it has been challenging because it has been a step up from my previous production. The budget's bigger, the whole thing's just bigger. So there's different challenges to face.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to deal with a lot of different departments wanting a lot of different things. I think you need to be able to hold your own ground.
Yeah.
Departments will be demanding towards accounts. You know, certain departments will want to buy certain things that will cost a certain amount of money. And it's sort of our job to say, well, actually, we can give you, you've got this amount of money in the budget. This is what you can have.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's compromise.
Yeah.
So I think people's skills are important. Patience is important. What else? I actually don't think having an accounting background or background in finance is necessarily particularly important.
I suppose that's something that you can learn. The stuff that you can't learn is then people skills. I think so many people have said this to me, even just people I've worked with, that sometimes people in the industry can be, I suppose, too quick to progress because they want that next job. They want to be able to be that next role above. Sometimes the worst thing you can do is progress too soon because by being in that role for a bit longer, maybe a bit longer than you need to be, you're still gaining them skills, and you're gonna just it's gonna mean when you do make that initial step up, you're gonna be better.
Bad Wolf, they're very keen for people to progress. You know, my financial controllers come out and sort of suggested courses we can do. But at the minute, I'm happy where I am.
Just hearing about your journey into telly and the fact that it did take a bit longer than others, but it's nice to know that. I think it's nice for people to listen and to hear that just because you're not an 18-year-old graduate, there's still a role for you. There's still job progression for you. You can still break it into this industry and you can still go and work on one of the greatest shows there's ever been created.
That's pretty much exactly why I wanted to do this, because I wasn't actually sure how much I could talk to you or tell you about. I would love people to sort of see me and go, oh, well, she's done it. I can do it, you know. And I don't even necessarily mean people like in their 40s or older. I just mean like the opportunities are there for everybody.
Next up, I'm chatting to Praveen, who is a sound trainee on the upcoming series of Doctor Who. He gives me all the insider tips for anyone that wants to work in the sound department, but we also talk about filmmaking as a whole and how his experience in sound has helped him in his filmmaking process and wanting to become a director himself.
First off, what is a sound trainee? What do you do?
The sound trainee, it's different with different recordists. My main role as sound trainee on Doctor Who is making sure that the team has everything to carry over to the next day and everything on the current day as well, which would mean battery and cable management and doing all our radio mics, checking of everything. There are different types of batteries. I don't want to get into details, but 9 volts, AA's, AAA's, big block batteries and so on. And then making sure we're connected to our video departments. So on Doctor Who or on bigger high-end TV or movie productions, you'll see that there is a dedicated video department which acts as a hub for the sound department to give sound to, so they can put it onto the director's monitor, and vice versa, where we can get picture for the sound department ourselves. Part of cable management doesn't mean you're just looking after your cables and wrapping them at the end of the day. It means that when you're deploying them or using them on set, you make sure that your department cables aren't a hazard to anyone.
How did you get into sound in the world of telly? What was it that inspired you?
It started out with wanting to be a director, as most of us glamorize sitting on the high chair that says director on the back.
Yeah, with our name there and people coming to us and looking after us and stuff.
Yeah, our names in bold on the call sheet, and it's a bigger size font, and you know that's what your eyes goes to. Yeah, it started out with that, and it's still a part of me. I still direct short films, but that's where it sort of came in as part of my university projects, or even 10 years ago. Back in college when we were making short films, it just sounded terrible, and we couldn't put our finger on. For some reason, we were like, all right, we have a camera department, we have an editor, I'm directing us, we have a writer. Why does it sound bad? And you're like, oh, there's no sound department. We just have a vlogging setup on top of a camera, and that doesn't cut it. I wouldn't lie and say made me interested in it, just to make my own movies better, to make them sort of eligible or even considered into sending them to film festivals. I then started looking at sound as a department. And in university, then we had these equipments, just everyone was going after the Aries and the Black Magics for the cameras. Nobody was fighting over the sound devices or the Zoom F4s. And so I just gravitated toward them, played with them, and you find out that they're technically so delicate and so advanced that you can manipulate it in so many ways. And it's such an interesting field to sort of keep you entertained in any aspect of film. You can never say you know everything. That's what made me want to become a filmmaker. When I started picking up sound, and after my short films were screened in our uni year, everybody noticed the difference immediately. Like you mentioned, you don't notice it until you watch a good film with sound, and then it's followed up by a bad short film with sound, and nobody wants to be in the room anymore.
We've spoken a bit about how you got your interest in sound, but on the latest series of Doctor Who, you were a trainee for Screen Alliance Wales within sound. How did you get involved in that? What was that application process like? Was it always something you wanted to do? And yeah, just talk to me about that process and what it was like being a trainee.
I moved to Wales at the end of 2019. I just Googled film companies in Wales, and you find It's My Shout and then Screen Alliance Wales are the top two that come up, other than BBC apprenticeship programs and so on. So I've been applying for them for the better part of 3.5 years. I don't know, stars aligned. As soon as I finished uni, I got an opportunity to be on one. I had the opportunity to work on a couple of It's My Shout short films, a BBC one and then an S4C one in Welsh. And those give you technically sort of a TV credit. I applied to Screen Lines, and then I had a phone call one day when I was at lunch break at work, oddly.
Yes.
And they said, "This is Screen Lines Wales. You're shortlisted. Can we just have you on a phone call for 5 minutes just to interview you?" I got a text 2 weeks later saying that they're offering me the job if I wanted it.
That's amazing. One thing we always say is it's always quite disheartening when you keep getting them no's or you keep applying for things and you don't get them. So I can imagine when you got that, it was a pretty special moment, just being able to be like, oh, wow, I'm gonna go. Did you know the show you're gonna work on at that point, or were you just excited, I suppose, to put what you always wanted to do to the test and actually go and pursue that career?
I had no idea when I was going to be filming there. It is weird considering, because as you said, for 3 years, you get sort of down when you get the no's. It's even more depressing when you don't get an answer at all.
Yeah.
You just get blanked and you're like, all right, that happened. But yeah, I didn't know it was going to be that. It is weird coming off of uni and 3 years of not getting any sort of industry opportunity and then landing on sort of the biggest thing that's filmed here. It was such a weird experience being on a set or on location, and it's completely on a different level to what you've sort of experienced and worked on a personal level. The minute I put my foot on set, we started off on a pretty big set, and then I got excited. And then it just kept building up and up, and it was we worked on it for 8 months.
You mentioned that being on set, obviously, you've had that experience in university. Being on set, it was very different to everything that you've known before. And I mean, I can relate to that in the fact that I'd gone to university when I first stepped on set of Casualty and got given the call sheet. I never knew how to read a call sheet, and things like small things like that are so pivotal to your day that when you eventually go onto set for the first time, it can be quite daunting. And so I think what would be really useful is, having had that 8 months training and working on the show and as a sound trainee, can you just describe a typical day on set as a sound trainee? What would you be doing throughout the day?
We'd have 10-hour days, which is sort of the usual for me as a trainee. As I mentioned, batteries are some of my biggest responsibilities. So from breakfast, I would leave about 5-10 minutes early, not that much. And then overnight, I would have charged all the batteries or put on charge all the batteries we used from the previous day. So I'd go collect all of them, re-battery all the contact packs we give to the cans, to the directors, producers, and so on, script supervisors. And then all the batteries that we use to run our antennas and radios. And if we're on the move, the entire card itself is on a big battery. To just do all that stuff, find out if we're in a different stage. Sometimes we wrap and move to the sound stage we're going to be in. Mm-hmm. But if it's been an 11, 12-hour day, we just leave it in the current stage or in an easy up tent, and then we do it on the next day. So we do all that, find a place to sit by. Of course, as I mentioned before, my job would be to find out where the video department's going to be stationed, so they're not too far away. Then finding out if there's a second unit sound. My job during breakfast at the moment would be to find out what radio frequencies they're on. Because the last thing you want is to feel like you're all done, you're set, you're having a cup of coffee, and then you find out all the radio mics are having interference on the actors and having to run back and forth to set to clear that. Because the last thing you want to do, especially like you said with sound, is that our work is at our best when people don't notice us. It's like an editor.
Yeah, I've heard so many
people
people
are
describe it in that way that you just kind of, it's really weird, isn't it? That you go to work and you don't want people to notice you, but it's the best way to explain it. You kind of got to work a way of being the best at what you do without being noticed. And it's an art form, I find.
Yeah, absolutely. For you to sort of blend in, and if the director and producers have their headphone looking at their monitor, and if they're almost feeling like they're watching the TV show or the movie that they're making, you've done a great job that day then.
Yeah.
The setup and de-rig, the beginning at the end of the day, are probably the most heavy workload days for a trainee or time periods. Then it does feel like there's a middle 8-hour gap in a 10, 12-hour day that feels like you're just there. No, it's mostly just being on standby, mostly for the recordist, but the second sound assistant who mics up the actors if we do have interference, or if we have microphone issues, if our pack's fallen down or anything like that, getting a replacement pack to them, getting a replacement microphone to them so they can remic the actor quickly. Because as you mentioned, time is key and you don't want anyone waiting on your department specifically. So it's just doing a lot of mostly floor runner, but specifically for the sound department. If the boom mic runs out of battery, to re-battery that, to put those batteries on charge. If we're having too much frequency interference, we might go on XLR, just cables for the boom mic. So then securing that, and then cable bashing. So you'd be on set behind the boom operator, making sure no one's tripping over on set. So quickly reeling it in, stuff like that. With costumes as well, if people have quite leathery costumes, if your director of that episode is a huge fan of The Matrix, they want all leather. It looks great, but then leather squeaks
It hides.
terribly loud. Yeah. So being on standby for the second AS with these foam paddings that goes in between microphones and so on, when the actors move around, and especially leather being so tight as well, it knocks it around quite a bit. And then if your actors are wearing heeled boots or heels in general, you're standing by with carpets, because if they're on set on the boom mic, which is pointed down, you can hear their voice, but you can also hear their heels very loudly. When they want to go for a wide, we would stick with the clickety clacks of the shoes, but then the recorders would prioritize the radio mics, so it's pointed up at them, so you don't hear much of it. So then my job would be to find out from the runners and the ADs if this is the only pass we're going to do, or if we're going to do a closer pass. And if they're going to do a closer pass, fingers crossed, you grab some carpets, be on standby, and then you lay it on the path where they're going to walk through. So now you can get a cleaner pass with the boom mic closer. I guess an entry-level person, the one thing that people don't tell you about is that it's grand and great, like you and I've talked about it. So it's on such a big level, so it's easy to get taken aback or overwhelmed by it. So it doesn't hurt if you're a little bit even over-prepped in that sense, or just, looking at the call sheet the night before, just not looking at the time when you're in and when lunch break is, but just like reading everything, who has speaking lines, how many people are expected to be in, anything that's connected to your department. If somebody has a costume change, does that mean that the radio mic needs to be removed and then put back in? So you need to communicate. The second AS, of course, would have done it, but then you talk to them to see if they need anything from a trainee perspective as an assistant. I think if you want to progress, even as a trainee, onto a second job, your potential into getting that second job is amplified by how your presence of mind is in your first job.
Having had your 8 months as a sound trainee, is there anything that you wish you knew or were taught in uni that would really benefit you now?
It's a great question.
I always wanted to be assistant director, but before I got onto a set during uni, no one had ever shown me what a call sheet was or anything like that. And it's such a Bible that you need to know. So I just wondered if there was anything in sound that you're just like, yeah, that's something that anyone listening is really beneficial for you to take forward.
There's this thing called a studio binder. So when we originally started making call sheets, for example, we would just go off a Word document and everything would be in a central alignment. Yeah. We thought that was good enough. We didn't even put a table or columns. And on my free time, I'm always on YouTube or on forums looking at film stuff. And now, today there's so much stuff out there for free or, to educate yourself with. I came across this thing called Studio Binder, and they had a formatted like professional level call sheet and then for free, and script supervisor forms, and for me especially sound report, which is something that you do, which wasn't taught to me in uni that you should be doing. You should be writing notes about every take, every slate number, what that is registered as on your SD card. So when you give it to the editor, and if it's a good take or not for you as sound.
What kind of things would you put down on a sound report? I imagine it'll be stuff like if there was a bang somewhere and there wasn't meant to be a bang, or errors in the audio.
Yeah, so basically any sort of anomalies that isn't in your control. There are a couple of times when you're going for a take, and then this is not even for comedic purpose. This actually happened, like a forklift is reversing with a very loud beeping reverse noise. So, you'd note that down. Of course, everyone can hear it outside of their cam, so you'd go for another pass if we have time. So it would include any sort of anomalies like that. The lead jacket that the actors were wearing, the first couple of passes we did, we had to just write down notes of like, sorry, just leather noises, because then in these things, they have a post-production department that does Pro Tools with post-production sound. So if they're doing any sound design or stuff like that. But of course, you don't want to do the thing of, they'll take care of it in post. You want to, this is your job, so you do it to the best.
Yeah.
And then you give it to them, and then they'll do their best with it. The best thing you could do is they can look at your work and go, I don't need to even touch this up. And then sometimes we do just a clean plate just for sound. We'd have the actor look on playback in a smaller monitor from the video department, and then they would try to sort of ADR it on set, if you will, or on location. So we still have the ambient noise at the same place.
When I was in university, we making our films, it's so intimate that you're having to do everything and you're all kind of on top of one another, and it's really fun, but it doesn't really set you up properly for what life is like on a proper film set, because you go from a team of 4 to a team of like hundreds.
For my traineeship, which I've done for 8 months, which is again a huge privilege. I think the biggest learning curve comes from hopefully this doesn't sound bad, but your work has an impact in the thing. That's why you're there. You're one among the hundreds, because your work has an impact. But when you go from you're a sound recordist in a short film, or you're a director in a short film, to, you're a fine, very small piece of a huge puzzle. You just have to have the mentality that you're going to grow into it, and one day you'll be a bigger piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, you're going to go in as a runner or a sound trainee or something. It's in you're building them skills. Be humble and don't have that ego about you, because you're working as a team, and that's what it is at the end of the day. You've got to be a really good team player.
Absolutely. And that's why I said I was privileged, because you'd be lucky if you got a week-long job, or even dailies here and there, just people calling you back. That's the biggest compliment this industry would give you, is that, hey, do you want to come back for another day or 2 weeks? And that means you're in. You got your foot in the door. People like working with you. You're good at what you do.
Now, to round off the podcast, we head back to Reece as he discusses just how many companies there are in Cardiff.
I think it's so true from both drama and unscripted point of view. That it's such a hub for talent. One of the things that we're just kind of pushing out again more now is we've got a pre-given industries map for Cardiff. It's worth people realising quite how range of different companies that exist in Cardiff. I've mentioned the fact that companies don't have HR departments. They'll probably just, there's one person in the office whose job it is to post a job. I know of companies who have needed people, but then haven't got the time to actually advertise or to actually reach out. So it's always worth just contacting people, reaching out, because the worst case scenario is, as long as you're polite about it, is you develop a contact, you start a conversation. Talk to kids in schools and they say to me, what's the most important thing I can do if I want to work in TV and film? And I always say, best thing I always is to watch a lot of TV and film. It's not going to be always easy, but if you love being here, that'll help smooth out the bumps. That passion for learning about sort of different roles and things that happen was just brilliant in terms of finding out about all the different ins and outs. It comes back to that, get that understanding of how the industry works.
We've spoken a lot, Welsh talent, and the importance of that new talent and how to get jobs and everything. But when it comes to Trainees Wales, what are you most proud of that you've achieved? It's a strange one, because obviously we've had talent, and I think we're evolving and maturing as an organisation, because we're now starting to, as well as
a focus on people getting their first jobs in the industry. We're now moving to the stage, hopefully maturing in the fact that we're now looking at supporting people stepping up into more senior roles. But it's not just about filling in the bottom. Is that sort of, we want to be helping to support that.
It's nice to have that support there for people. I'm really passionate about Wales as an industry and making it as open as an industry as possible, especially within Cardiff. Thank you so much, Reece, for chatting today and talking about Screenlights Wales and showcasing what it is you do. I'm sure someone watching or listening will have learned something.
No problem at all. Great stuff.